Hi everyone, I just wanted to first start by introducing myself. So my name is Laura Butcher, I'm the founder of Soul Sanctuary Studios, which is a yoga studio based in Worcester. I'm originally from Surrey and London, and I moved up to Worcester a couple of years ago now and started my yoga studio there. And I got pregnancy yoga qualified back in 2017, so quite a while ago now. And I was teaching for the first 2 years after getting qualified, but it always felt a little bit inauthentic for me because I hadn't previously been pregnant, I hadn't had children, so I knew exactly what to do kind of from the science and the kind of technicalities, but it didn't feel real because I couldn't really empathise with what they were going through. And now very excited to say that I am 17 weeks pregnant. So I'm over the first trimester and into the second trimester. And I thought no better time really to pick back up my pregnancy yoga and also my pregnancy yoga teaching, just to try and share as much yoga as possible with anybody in the same position as I am. And of course, during isolation and COVID, it's even more important to try and kind of keep active and stay healthy and happy physically and mentally, and that can be really difficult when you're feeling, you know, kind of unwell or tired from pregnancy, or maybe just kind of alone and you just need some time for you and time to look after your body. So yeah, so putting on these pregnancy yoga videos just to try and help out anyone who might be in the same position as I am and who fancies giving pregnancy yoga a go. So to start with, it's probably a really good idea to talk about what are the kind of do's and don'ts of pregnancy yoga, because there's lots of like information out there and everybody has different training, so that's cool. It's all coming from a really well-intentioned place. So I'll just share the information that I got from my training. So I did my training in the house in Putney, Yoga Mama, which is very close to the House of Yoga, which is where I did my original training. And I trained under Sherry Lathy, who's absolutely amazing. She's like a goddess and is all about female empowerment and the beauty of the woman's body. And it was really, really inspiring. And so her kind of premise for pregnancy yoga was really obvious and really simple. And it was basically that we are preparing the body for birth. And that sounds really obvious, but actually when you look at a lot of pregnancy yoga out there, it doesn't really look like they're doing that. So if you kind of think like, first of all, mentally, so it's obviously preparing the body physically and mentally, but if we look at the mental side of things first, which for me is like my passion, I really love the psychology behind yoga, and that's what we thread into all our yoga classes at the studio and online. So really what we're trying to do now, and this has been like the biggest lesson for me, especially as mine was an unplanned pregnancy, I was actually on the coil. So it's taken me a really long time to accept that I'm pregnant. And still, I feel like I'm struggling with that a bit at the moment. It just doesn't really feel real, even though I'm kind of 17 weeks in. So this is just all about the mind, first and foremost, about that acceptance, and also about that kind of letting go of the old self. And I remember Sherry used to talk about that all the time. So we let go of the old self, and that can be really, really difficult. A lot of our anxiety can be caused by like holding on to what we knew and who we were and what we looked like and our old lifestyle and the speed that we used to run at. And this is really about being just as flexible in the mind as we are the body. So it's really about slowing down, which is something I really struggle with, running my own business and just generally being quite a kind of active, fast-paced person. Find it so difficult to slow down. So this is going to be a great challenge for me to actually slow down in my yoga practice now, and also obviously in my kind of day-to-day. So it's about letting go of the old self and embracing the new self, and actually getting really excited about that change rather than having any kind of anxiety by trying to hold on to what was. So that's the first thing, and that can take a lot of practice, and we need to see that in our yoga practice. So for me, you know, I'm used to teaching like 90 minutes power yoga. I'm still teaching that. I'm not demoing anymore, I'm just talking to camera. But we need to kind of bring in that change and that acceptance of slowing down into our pregnancy yoga sequence. So the sequences are slow, and that's on purpose because we need to have that time to actually slow down, to reconnect with ourselves and also to reconnect with baby, because we might be going so fast in our day to day that we might even forget we're pregnant. Probably not in the first trimester if you're feeling awful like I was, but later on. This is such a magical time in our lives that actually it couldn't be more important to just slow down and be present and acknowledge what is happening for you in the here and the now. So the classes are slow, and that's on purpose. My classes are probably a little bit more challenging than others might be, just because I'm used to teaching power yoga. But we have amazing other teachers like Polly and Emma who come from different schools of yoga, so they'll be offering some variety for you as well. But bear in mind, pregnancy yoga is slow, so that we can slow down, reconnect with ourselves, reconnect with baby. And also trying to think about the kind of direction of your poses. So if you think about what we're really trying to do, prepare the body for birth physically. So mentally we're slowing down, and now physically, directionally, we need to be going down. So all of our poses really want to try to kind of encourage that optimal birthing position. So trying to get the baby to kind of drop lower. And what I've seen in a lot of my research and kind of online yoga classes is people trying to kind of hold on to the old self, still doing the arm balances and the inversions, and where the head is down and the hips are up. And surely that would be kind of birthing out through the mouth, which is not the point. So the direction of the yoga poses and the yoga flow is really important. So directionally, everything needs to be kind of heading downwards to work towards optimal birth, easiest birth, and to get the body prepared for that. So directionally, we consider that. And then there's just some really obvious stuff. So people can get really confused about what you can do and can't do in yoga when you're pregnant. So I just want to try and clarify that as much as possible. So you think about slowing down, which is as much for the mind, for the body. Think about directionally everything going down so that it's, you know, heading towards the right direction for birth. And then if you think about, well, certainly in the first trimester, you wouldn't be practicing yoga. So you don't practice before 13 weeks is actually recommended. Some people say 12, some people might say 16, but certainly in my training, it was 13. And that's because obviously in the first trimester, the risk of miscarriage is much higher than in the second and the third trimester. So the idea is that the baby's trying to bed in. And so if you imagine that we're kind of, you know, going up and down a lot, and twisting can be particularly dangerous at that stage. And I don't say kind of dangerous to instill fear in any way, but it just kind of makes sense. If the baby's trying to embed, then you don't want to be kind of twisting around in that lower area. So no yoga before 13 weeks, and then after 13 weeks, the second and the third trimester, we avoid closed twists. And closed twists just basically means deep twists. So if you are doing any twisting, it's great to do it from the upper body, and I'll be showing you how to do this, you know, or keeping an arm down on an open knee. So it's just a very slight twist rather than doing any deep twists where you're coming right across the body and closing the body off. So open twists rather than closed twists. So just gentle twisting, not to upset the baby, which is trying to grow and doesn't want to be kind of squished when you turn. So that's hopefully quite obvious. And then looking at our stance, so you guys probably know by now, or if not, the different hormones that are released during pregnancy, they actually encourage our ligaments to get looser and longer, and that makes sense because we're going to have to widen to let the baby out. And so because of those hormones that are released and help the muscles to relax, we're actually able to go a lot further. And sometimes if you're not aware of that and you're still doing your normal yoga practice, or you might just notice if you were stretching like, gosh, I feel like I can go a lot deeper than normal. Although that might feel wonderful at the time, what we have to be really cognizant of is postnatally, what does that lead to? And not always, but if you overstretch the muscles when they're not quite ready for it, then postnatally that can lead to difficulties, which we just want to avoid. So we always say, because of that, just try and keep your stance when you're stepping forward or stepping legs apart, not too wide. So it's just nice and safe. Essentially, it's about keeping the body in alignment and keeping kind of neutral rather than overshooting it. And then, there might be a tendency to kind of overstretch when the muscles aren't quite ready. It's just that the ligaments have relaxed to open up the body. So bear that in mind, keep everything quite kind of narrow, and for the same reason, not too deep either. So if you're doing squats or anything, try and kind of keep those a little bit narrower and not so low down either. And remember, this is not a workout to try and kind of get your six pack and get really lean and toned. This is just to keep you aligned and keep you healthy and make sure that everything is open and spacious. So we're not kind of going to be doing this to get really deep and, out of breath and really trying to strengthen. In a way, we're trying to soften. So it has a different intention. So we wouldn't be needing to do that kind of really challenging, deep holding poses anyway. All in that essence of kind of slowing down and connecting back with yourself. So what have we covered? So making sure that your stance is a little bit slower, your twists are open rather than closed, everything kind of keeping neutral. And then also balances. So balances are great because we need to learn to adapt to our new shift in body weight, our different centre of gravity. But consider maybe using a wall or just something to make sure that you don't fall over. I mean, that's really obvious, isn't it? You wouldn't want to fall over anyway. You definitely don't want to fall over when you're pregnant. So you don't want to be doing balances which are going to encourage that. So just have some support there. And for that reason, you wouldn't be doing arm balances. And this is going to be difficult for me because, I love doing arm balances. I've been doing them for years and years as my normal yoga practice, but I'm having to let go of that, of the old self. And some people really disagree with that. But, for me, I always ask myself the question, is it worth it? What is the point in doing my crow pose? Is it more important to look after my baby and look after myself and practice change rather than holding an arm balance? So so avoiding arm balances, and if you are doing any other balances, just have a wall or just make sure you don't feel too wobbly. So just maybe take an easier option. And then generally not lying down on your back for too long, so that can just lead to blood pooling, which sounds a bit dramatic, but essentially you just want to keep the blood flowing. And also if you are, because usually at the end of the practice you would roll over to one side. Some of you might have done normal yoga classes, some of you might have not, but we do this thing called Shavasana, where you kind of lie down and rest at the end of your practice. One of the best bits. And then usually you would roll to your right, but if you're pregnant you would roll to your left, just because we have the vena cava down the right side, and so you don't want to kind of compress that and shut it off, so we roll to the left to keep that flowing. And this is not too, sometimes this talk can create fear, and it's not supposed to at all, or they call it fixation, where mothers can become particularly worried or paranoid about their position. Are they doing it right, or are they doing it wrong? It is very unlikely to cause any significant kind of damage or problems. If you were doing it a couple of times a day, or really overdoing it and just not listening to your body, then we have to be aware of the risks, especially as a teacher. But generally speaking, you're going to be absolutely fine in a pregnancy yoga class. And when we go to sleep, we don't know, we might roll onto our right by mistake, or maybe we just roll onto the right anyway. It's how we're used to sleeping, that's how I'm used to sleeping. Generally speaking, it's all going to be fine, but just for best practice, we roll onto our left. So just bear that in mind. Trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, and obviously we wouldn't do a heated practice anymore. Some of you might usually do a hot yoga class, but this is all about slowing down, cooling down, and you certainly wouldn't want to be holding your breath during a yoga practice, because that's just not natural. Birthing's a really natural process, and we want to be really have the breath flowing, so it doesn't make sense to be practicing holding your breath and putting the body under any stress in that way, or a deficit of oxygen is not going to help the baby. So we just keep the breath flowing. And there's lovely breath meditations we can use where the golden thread just comes in and comes out. These can be really helpful for labour, I hope. So just keep the breath nice and cool and flowing, just naturally, however works for you. And then there's a really interesting topic around making noise. So this is something I would definitely have to work on. You wouldn't think it by the amount that I speak, but they say, in pregnancy yoga, it can be really helpful to kind of make noises as you're doing poses. And although that's going to feel probably quite awkward, probably less awkward if you're doing it at home, but like in a full class, really what it is getting used to hearing yourself make noise. Because during birth, you know, that is very likely to happen. And also it's a case of like being okay with being heard. So I was speaking to one of my friends who's recently just had a baby's a couple of weeks old. She was kindly explaining her birth story to me and how important it was that she knew what the doctors were telling her to do and why, and if she had any options, and then being quite clear about what she wanted. And obviously that's not for everyone. Some people just want to kind of relax and be, you know, told and guided, and that's cool too. But she found it really important to be heard during her birth and to make sure it was how she wanted, not just for the convenience of the hospital or how somebody else wanted. So that can be quite difficult to kind of be heard in those situations, to be confident enough to put your voice forward. And a big part of that is just getting used to kind of hearing yourself making sound, especially when it might feel uncomfortable or awkward. So that could be something to consider. See if I'm brave enough to bring it in. Polly or Emma might be able to. So there are some kind of key points. Hopefully that's really kind of obvious, and if it's not, then I hope it was helpful. So just bear in mind, slow down mentally, and just take this like sacred time to connect with yourself and B with your baby. You know, some of you might have had babies already and this one is equally as special, or maybe this is going to be your only one, and so just taking this time to really connect, so nice and slow, and then making sure that directionally everything is going downwards, our stance is nice and narrow, our movements aren't too deep, we're not holding for too long, breath is really flowing, try not to fall over if possible, and make sure you roll onto your left. So yeah, pretty simple really, and don't worry, because we'll make sure that in all the classes everybody's staying super safe and most of all just kind of enjoying and relaxing and making most of the time for you. So I hope that's helpful as a little introduction. If you've got any questions, remember I'm not a qualified doctor or midwife or anything like that, just a pregnancy yoga teacher. So always make sure that you ask your midwife before you start practicing yoga. Make sure that you are able to, for whatever's going on for you personally, medically. And remember that of course you do take responsibility for yourself during these classes, especially as we can't be there in person. So kind of practicing at your own risk, that is probably all obvious. I would make sure that your room is set up in a way that is as beautifully relaxing and comforting for you as possible. I've popped on my little tea lights and a candle, and I've actually drawn the curtains, and I've got my blankets ready. So this will be as great for me, hopefully, as it is for you, to just take some time to relax and unwind. So just indulge in being at home and being comfortable, and just really make this a special time for you, so that you can kind of feel recharged and able to make the most out of this really special time. So I hope that's helpful, and yeah, any questions, just get in touch. Would absolutely love to hear from you and to connect with anybody who is also going through pregnancy at this time. So yeah, okay guys, take care and enjoy the classes.